All right, party peoples of the interwebs, this is an update in the Dexter Taylor case. For those of you who don't know who Dexter Taylor is, he was on the channel, say about a couple of weeks ago, maybe a few weeks ago now. He is the New York man, middle-aged man, who was arrested for unlawful possession of a firearm. I think the exact charge was possession of an unlicensed firearm in New York State. He was in possession of these firearms because he would build his own firearms at home with these kits that he would procure off the internet from lawful sites in his own name, have delivered to his apartment in New York, and he put together something like 12 or 13 firearms, rifles, and small arms in his apartment. The media ran with this story because it was pitched as such that this man had, and I'm quoting, an arsenal of ghost guns in his apartment. He ordered the stuff online, lawfully in his own name, delivered to his apartment. He was raided by the police. They arrested him. They charged him with a slew of crimes, all of which, multiple counts of possession of an unlicensed firearm. Because this is New York State, you need to register your firearm with the state in order for it to be lawful. He was facing 18 years in jail. He went to trial. We did a podcast during his trial. Dexter Taylor, a wonderful guy. He's got a radio show, Carbon Mike on Twitter, Future Radio Podcast, I think, on Twitter. You can find him under Carbon Mike. He is a wonderful guy, no criminal record, kid, ex-wife, useful, contributing member of society who happened to have an affinity towards building things with his hands and built himself some firearms at home which were dubbed ghost guns. Passed off as being, no serial numbers, untraceable, all rubbish from what I understand, because it was serialized. It was quite clearly traceable because they found him by way of the kits that he ordered online, but they give it a big scary name, ghost guns, and they make people think these are guns that are frequently used in crimes, violent crimes, which statistically, I don't know that they are. I don't think that they are. But the bottom line also is that Dexter Taylor was not even charged with selling, possessing outside of his apartment, trafficking in these ghost guns. He was just putting together firearms in his apartment with lawfully procured kits, as is, one would think, his constitutional right to do so. He went to trial. We did a podcast while he was standing trial. He was optimistic, I think, when we spoke that, somehow he'd get acquitted. I don't know what he was relying on other than jury nullification, but this is New York, and people ain't about to, acquit when someone's building big bagged, scary guns in their apartment. He was convicted and swiftly hauled off to Rikers Island, awaiting sentencing. I spoke with him while he was awaiting sentencing. He's filing an appeal. He's presenting a request for release pending appeal, which is currently being adjudicated by, I think, a single person who judges whether or not appeal will result in him being released pending the results of the appeal. But the bottom line, the day before yesterday, he was sentenced by the judge Darkeh, D-A-R-K-E-H. He was sentenced to a decade in prison. The prosecution requested not the maximum. They went reasonable. They didn't request the full 18-year maximum. They requested 10 years in jail, and Judge Darkeh granted what the prosecution was asking for, a decade. For a man with no criminal record, who was not accused of any violent crime whatsoever because there was no act of violence carried out at any point in all of this, a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen, a decade of what's left of his life. It's an outrage. It's an injustice. The amazing thing is that, from what was explained to me, because I'm sitting there walking my dog in the streets of Florida and I get a call, and it's a call from Rikers Island. You get this automated message when people call you and it says, this is not a secure line. This is being recorded and monitored for law enforcement purposes. If you're an attorney, go online or whatever, register your number so that you can have a private call with your client or whomever, as if any call out of there is private. I wouldn't believe it for, as far as anyone can throw me. I'm walking my dog. I'm sitting there in the sun listening to mockingbirds chirp in the tree, and I get a call from Dexter Taylor from Rikers Island. He sounds very optimistic. He sounds upbeat, more so than I think most people would be under the circumstances. I knew what had happened. It's like, dude, how's it going? I heard you just got sentenced to a decade. Is that true? And he's like, yep. I didn't think the judge was going to, do something so outrageous in our favor. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he says, well, this will help on appeal. I don't know if this is a silver lining. I don't know if this is a spin. I don't know if there's a coping mechanism from Dexter. But he's like, this is an outrageous sentence, at least, according to counsel, according to all accounts, outrageous sentence. First-time offender for a non-violent crime. And all of a sudden, the people clamoring for criminal justice reform, the progressives, the so-called, strike the cash bail system, strike the 3 strikes you're out system, criminal justice reform system, lock up a dude, non-violent, no criminal offense, tax-paying, contributing member of society for a decade for a non-violent gun possession charge. So he was upbeat. When we spoke the first time, he said he's been praying, he's been doing push-ups, and he's been playing chess. So exercising the heart, the soul, and the mind. And he still sounds as upbeat as ever, but he recounted to me what happened during sentencing. Now, the first thing I asked him, because I read, I think it was in the Western Standard, the judge is alleged to have said in the courtroom, do not bring up the Second Amendment. There is no Second Amendment in this courtroom. This is New York State. And I was like, okay, I read that in the paper, Dexter. Can you confirm that's what the judge actually said? And he said, yes. Maybe not verbatim, but pretty much verbatim, that's what the judge said. They're ordering the transcripts right now of the court hearings. They've got to order the transcripts, pay for the transcripts. But the judge, during the trial, said, confirmed, do not bring your Second Amendment into this courtroom. There is no Second Amendment in this courtroom. This is New York State. As if the state of New York does not have to abide by the law of the land, the highest supreme law of the land, that being the Constitution. As if this judge, when she took an oath of office, did not have to pledge that oath to the highest law of the land, that being the Constitution. So you have arguably an activist judge on the bench. Surprise, surprise, but that wouldn't explain away the jury conviction, but you get a jury conviction. And Judge Darkey gave Dexter Taylor 10 years in jail at the request of the Crown. Dexter told me something very interesting. He said, you quote me on this, this is what happened during the court hearing. The judge was complaining about mean comments and names and nasty rhetoric that she was seeing online vis-a-vis her. The judge, as she's getting ready to sentence Dexter Taylor for a non-violent gun-related charge possessing of an unlicensed firearm in New York State, starts talking about the mean names and hate that she's getting online as she sentences Dexter Taylor to a decade, what the prosecution was asking for. So it's very interesting that it seems like you have not just an activist judge, but a jilted activist judge on the bench. Talking to Dexter, he said something very interesting. He said, de minimis non curat lex. Quote me on that, he said. I had to look it up. It means the law should not be concerned with trivialities. Now, I don't know if he meant in terms of the judge being upset by being called names online because she confirmedly has no respect for the highest law of the land, the Second Amendment, which shall not be infringed. I don't know if he's saying it in terms of, the sentence that he got, the fact that, what his crime was, his alleged crime was possessing an unlicensed, unregistered firearm. Is that the triviality of law that should not be concerned with the law? I don't know what he meant by it, actually. I thought it was more about, the judge getting miffed, insulted by the names that she was being called online, putting herself out, portraying herself as the victim while she sentences a man to the better part of the rest of his life. I don't know. But Dexter is obviously going to appeal, where presumably you will be able to raise Second Amendment arguments, constitutional rights, the highest law of the land at the legal appellate level, not to be argued before the jury. It's wild. Dexter was only a little bit concerned, disconcerted, or dismayed that there doesn't seem to be enough interest in this case as far as he can tell in the media. It's only now starting to be reported in the media. I saw finally an article in Reason and an article in Yahoo. But people don't seem to be taking an interest in this case for what it represents because it is an all-out assault on the Second Amendment. Bear in mind, we're in the wake of the Bruin decision, Supreme Court ruling in Bruin, and now you have a state court judge saying, do not bring the Second Amendment into this courtroom. This is New York State. What you have here is the government coming down and turning a constitutional right into a privilege to be granted by the government, taken away by the government, and hell hath fury if you dare violate that privilege that the government thinks it's given to you, and build and possess your own firearms in violation of state law to register them with the state. So Dexter is more concerned about the big picture that this conviction, this sentencing, is an outright assault on the Second Amendment, and he doesn't think that enough conservatives, people on the right, GOP, Republicans, Second Amendment defenders are taking an interest in it. And I've seen a bit of the tendency that people say, FAFO, fudge around, find out. You live in commie California, you live in commie New York State. Don't be surprised and don't complain when the commie government comes down on you like the commies that they are. Dexter's response to that in podcasts is, don't think they're going to stop at New York. You can abandon New York State to the commies. They ain't going to stop there. Communism, socialism, totalitarianism, authoritarianism has never really been satisfied with its current border. And you can go and abandon California to the commies. You can abandon New York State to the commies and flee to Florida, Texas, New Hampshire, Tennessee. And they'll come and get you there when they're done destroying New York State and California. I appreciate the argument. The flip side is you live in these whacked out provinces. That's my Canadian side talking. You live in these whacked out states with these whacked out, hyper-criminalized gun possession laws. And what are you going to hope for jury nullification? That a jury is going to say, yeah, you can go and build 13 firearms in your apartment, these big, bad, scary assault rifles. Dexter, I say, was playing a dangerous game. I don't think he was playing it on purpose. He's taking a matter of principle and hoping that those who advocate for Second Amendment rights are going to come to his defense, rally behind him, at the very least put this story on blast. You have rogue state entities utterly defying not just the Constitution and the supreme law of the land, but the Supreme Court rulings ratifying the supreme law of the land. And in as much as these people like to call other people insurrectionists, criticize Trump for criticizing judges and attacking the judiciary, they are overt, outright disregarding and disrespecting Supreme Court rulings and saying, yeah, we heard what you said in Bruin, but this is New York State and don't bring in your Second Amendment rights into this courtroom. So he is appealing. He is awaiting a determination on whether or not he gets released pending his appeal. He's been sentenced to a decade in prison, non-violent, no victim, and this is a crime of a man ordering online lawfully in his own name, delivered to his apartment and constructing his own firearms. But because they weren't registered and licensed with the state, unlawful possession of a firearm, and he's been sentenced to a decade. So if you're interested in this, if this is one of the battles you want to fight, politically speaking, peacefully speaking, awareness level speaking, share the story. Dexter Taylor is his name. Get it to people, podcasters you think might have an interest in this. I'm going to see if I can get an interview with Dexter from prison. From what I understand, he can do it, but the time slots are going to be allotted because they cut you off after 20 minutes. I'm going to see if I can get his attorney on. I'm a Canadian, born and raised. I was brought up on the argument, you don't need 10 rounds in a magazine to go hunting. I now appreciate that the Second Amendment is not, was not, and never will be about hunting. It was about a well-regulated militia, the right to self-defense, the God-given right to self-defense, and as the text goes, relatively unequivocally, shall not be infringed. And I've lived through what happens when the government not only doesn't think it's a right that can be infringed, thinks it's a mere privilege that can be revoked by the government and have laws and punishment implemented that are so punitive. There's no such thing as gun possession anymore. There's no such thing as lawful possession. It's a liability to own a firearm because break the laws, break the rules, store a loaded gun in Canada, you can land yourself in jail for years. So I've lived through that. I appreciate the importance, the foresight that went into drafting the Constitution, and I'm seeing in real time what happens when rogue activist judges do not respect the Constitution. You lose the Republic, you lose this wonderful experiment that was the American experiment. So Dexter Taylor, this is the story. Put it out there. Thank you for listening. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe, make sure your notifications are turned on, all that good stuff, yada, 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 and dinner time. Peace.